Have you ever thought about what would happen if one day you woke up and saw that the skin on your hands and feet was becoming hard and rough like tree bark? No, I'm being serious. Imagine branches growing out of your hands and feet as if you're turning into a real tree. You might be thinking to yourself right now, well, that only happens in science fiction movies or animation. But no, there really are people on this planet who have experienced something like this with their whole being. In this video, we're going to dive into the world of medicine and explore strange and true stories of people afflicted by a rare and mysterious disease. A disease that has caused their bodies to turn into terrifying trees. We have stories that I'm sure will not only surprise you, but might even scare you a little, because they're all real. An important question arises here. What causes a person's body to turn into a tree? Is this a rare disease, or perhaps a strange kind of genetic mutation? This strange disease is called Tree Man Syndrome, a disease that has changed these people's lives in a bizarre way. So stay with me because the story is just getting started. One of the strangest and most astonishing stories is about Muhammad Abul Bajandar, a man from Bangladesh who has been afflicted with a rare disease called epidermodysplasia viruciformis. This disease causes his skin to resemble the bark of trees. That's why Muhammad has become known as the Tree Man. It's important to know that Muhammad has been battling this disease since he was a teenager. At first, he paid no attention to the changes in his skin, but when warts and strange growths began to appear on his hands and feet, he realized he was dealing with something far more serious than a simple illness. These warts grew larger day by day, and his skin became so rough that it looked more and more like tree bark. During this time, he underwent several surgeries, but unfortunately, each time the warts came back. As he himself said, his hands and feet turned into roots and tree trunks. He also mentioned in an interview that he became known as the Tree Man because of his illness. My disease is very rare and is not commonly seen anywhere in the world. In fact, to date, fewer than 200 cases of this disease have been reported worldwide. This disease is caused by the HPV virus, or human papillomavirus, and those who contract it have a weak immune system and cannot easily fight off the virus. In Muhammad's case, his disease was so rare that doctors were unable to find a definitive cure for him. Nevertheless, Muhammad still hopes that a treatment will be found and that his life will return to normal. Another amazing story about tree people is related to this person, Didi Koswara, a man from Indonesia who suffers from a similar disease. Didi is also known as the Tree Man, and his illness began when he was 15 years old. When Didi got a minor wound, he paid no attention to it, but a wart quickly grew on his knee. At first, the wart was small, but it spread uncontrollably and turned into a major problem. In fact, due to a rare genetic issue in his immune system, Didi was unable to fight off the HPV virus, which caused growths resembling tree branches and bark to start appearing on his body, especially on his hands and feet. As time went on, these strange and unusual warts began to spread, and Didi's skin turned into something resembling tree bark. Currently, the weight of these warts reaches 5 kilograms or 12 pounds, and insects live inside them. He used to be able to work as a fisherman or a builder, but due to the severity of his condition, he was forced to give up all his jobs. Didi even joined a freak show at one point to earn some money through it. But his life has always been affected by this strange disease, and eventually his wife left him because she could no longer cope with his financial and health problems. Two of Didi's children supported him, but in the end, an American doctor named Dr. Anthony Gaspari decided to treat him to improve his quality of life. However, despite several surgeries, the warts returned, and due to complications from this disease, he passed away on January 30, 2016, at the age of 44. Now, an important point about Didi is that for much of his life, he struggled to fight against this strange disease. When the doctors were able to remove some of these warts from his body, Didi was once again able to resume some of the activities he used to do, like fishing and masonry. In fact, this surgery, which involved removing more than 2 kilograms or 4 pounds of these warts, helped Didi to use his hands again. But the question remains is whether there is a definitive cure for these diseases, or if it is only a long and costly struggle for those affected. There is no cure for this virus, so people should get the HPV vaccine before infection. This virus targets a specific type of cell called keratinocytes. These are the very cells that produce keratin. Just like the ones you see when calluses form on your skin, the virus causes excessive production of keratin, and the result is those growths that can develop on the body for years. On the other hand, after surgery, these warts usually return later. Therefore, doctors suggest, like treating common warts, medications are better for this disease, such as salicylates or creams like Aldara, and even laser treatments. In other words, the same treatment methods where body tissue is burned using heat or electricity. But in Didi's case, it seemed that he needed both types of treatment, but unfortunately, as I mentioned, his body couldn't endure it. But the third story is about a 75-year-old man named Ron Sweden from the town of Brewster in Massachusetts, USA, who experienced a strange and terrifying incident. Ron had always loved seafood. One night, his wife Nancy decided to make his favorite dish, but at dinner, something strange happened. Instead of enjoying his meal, Ron just pushed his food around with his fork and had no appetite at all. This was very strange to his wife, because Ron could never turn down a delicious meal. She thought maybe Ron had eaten earlier or didn't feel like eating that dish. But something inside her told her this wasn't an ordinary case. In 2 weeks, Ron's appetite decreased. He wasn't eating at all. And worst of all, his condition was getting worse day by day. One day, while he was sitting at the computer, he suddenly started coughing. The coughing fits were so severe he could hardly breathe. But the coughing continued and got worse every day. With each passing day, his body grew weaker. Sometimes he couldn't even breathe properly. Every day, Ron had to cope with these coughing fits. But each time he coughed, he felt like someone who had reached the end of the line. Things got to the point where Ron couldn't even get up anymore and just lay stretched out on the couch. His coughing even looked like convulsions. One day, when he had a severe attack, Nancy called emergency services in a panic, and the ambulance arrived very quickly. At the hospital, the doctors determined that Ron's condition was critical. His blood oxygen level was low, and his blood pressure was low. Without immediate treatment, he could have suffered organ failure or died. This was when doctors realized the problem was related to something beyond common respiratory illnesses. After taking an X-ray, the doctor said Ron's lungs were filled with fluid, and an abnormal mass in his lung. The doctor performed a bronchoscopy and found a mass inside his lung, located at the top of one of the left airways. This mass looked suspicious. The doctor thought it might be lung cancer, but after tests and further examination, the results were still inconclusive. At first, the test results showed that the tissue of the mass was completely normal and there was no sign of cancer. This made Ron's family a little happy, as at least they knew Ron didn't have cancer. However, the mass was still there and was blocking the airway. Ron had surgery again. This time, the doctor used anesthesia to check thoroughly. The doctor's expectations changed. After, the doctor asked for soil. You heard right, soil, because what he had removed from the patient's lung needed to be buried. The mass thought cancer was actually just a single pea that had accidentally entered his lung. But this pea had started to grow inside Ron's lung and had sprouted to about 4.22 millimeters. Exactly what they thought was a cancerous mass was actually a pea that had grown inside his lung. But how did this little pea end up in his lung? Well, normally there is a flap in the body called the epiglottis that prevents food from entering the lungs. But sometimes this flap doesn't function properly, and part of the food can enter the lungs. In fact, the pea had entered the airway, and Ron's body recognized it as a foreign object, gathering defensive cells around it, which caused the airway to become blocked and the lung to fill with fluid. Fortunately, Ron's fate was good. After the doctors realized that the suspicious mass was actually just a sprouted green pea and not cancer or a tumor, they were relieved and quickly removed it from the lung. Following surgery, Ron's breathing and symptoms improved quickly. After weeks hospitalized, his appetite returned and he became interested in seafood again. Of course, with a bit more caution when chewing. There isn't much about his current condition, but at that time he was 75. After surgery, his health improved. All of these stories are truly astonishing and shocking. It's truly fascinating how complex and amazing our bodies can be. In other words, it's really unbelievable how rare diseases can affect a person's life. How sometimes even a single pea can grow in the lung, or warts can develop on the skin that turn it into branches and structures resembling a tree. It's astonishing. I believe medical science advances daily by paying attention to different types of diseases. As a result, one day will come when no human will have to struggle with such severe and incomprehensible problems. Tell me, if you were in their place and a pea grew in your lung or your hands and feet turned into a tree, how would you feel? If you have thoughts on these diseases or similar stories, write them in the comments. All these stories are a reminder that the human body is more complex than we think. Sometimes, nature can even take unpredictable paths and reveal itself in completely unexpected ways. We never know what challenges life has in store for us. So sometimes, even a single pea or even a small injury can create a terrifying story for us. The lesson from this video is that hope and effort can always find a way to overcome difficulties. Even in the face of incurable and rare diseases, there is always hope. And by using science and medicine, we can move toward recovery, hoping for a day when no one suffers from illness.